continue to face oppression. This is according to the conveners of the National KhoiSan Coloured Consultative Conference NCC 2018 that starts today and concludes on Monday, the 24th of September. The conference will address racial discrimination, social exclusion, marginalisation, persistent colonial domination, denial of the First Nation status and land alienation. Joining us via Skype is Khoisan researcher Brian Ebden. Brian, thank you very much indeed for your time. Just, I'd like to start off with some history in terms of the scientific and genetic studies. What does it tell us about the Khoisan people?
It's a very good morning to you and to all your viewers. Firstly, just very quickly, it's very dangerous for the Khoisan movement, or this consciousness, to refer to himself as First Nation. Because when you refer to yourself and take ownership of the word first, you have to now go into history, anthropology, genetics, and science and see who really was here first. And from a scientific and a genetic anthropological point of view, Africans were in South Africa. And we talk going back anywhere between 175,000 to 200,000 years. All Africans. These weren't Khoisan people. These were Africans, a group of Africans with two distinct lines, and the mitochondrial DNA reads, I have a cold, reads L0 and L0 and L1. Now, L1 and L0 are the two children from our most recent common ancestor, where all human beings on the entire planet, all groups originate from. This woman and this group and these two children, these two female children, originated, well, this is what scientists are believing now for a number of reasons, and I can spend 2 hours talking about it and give you evidence of it, originated in the Pinnacle Point cave system in Mossel Bay. They then, 125,000 years ago, due to sudden inclement weather and we were living in an ice age, and there was a flooding, a massive flood, which went inland 261 kilometers. They then, over a period of time, 20,000, 25,000 years, they then migrated all the way up to Nigeria, where I am right now. Now, when I put this argument forward to the Khoisan community 3-4 years ago, they were up in arms saying, I'm mad, I'm taking the side of black people, blah, 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 blah. However, I've been scientifically vindicated.
What sort of evidence, Brian Ebden, what sort of evidence? We might get, there's a risk that we might get lost in the history, and unfortunately in terms of time. But what sort of evidence, if you can bring to the fore? You saying that the Khoisan are not the First Nation?
No, Africans are. There was no group identity at that time. But let me just go to Nigeria quickly. The Simmons Genome Diversity Project, which is housed in Harvard, took 80 of the world's best genetic scientists, took 300 genomes from 142 diverse populations around the world. The results of the study sat in the international community for 8 months doing peer review, and it was accepted 8 months later. It was then published on the 21st of September 2016. It proves that Khoisan people split from Yoruba people 87,000 years ago in Nigeria. That San people, or Mbuti, split 56,000 years from Khoisan, from Yoruba people. Yoruba people being the progenitor genetic group for every group outside of Africa. Every group outside of Africa finds their progeny in terms of genetics from the Yoruba group of Nigeria. This is common fact, accepted science from around the world.
Brian, Brian, yeah, I hear you. We're dealing with a very emotive, very pressing issue of land here in South Africa. In terms of the original owners of the land, in terms of land claims, what sort of claims do the Khoisan people have?
Okay, can I just go one step, if you don't mind, so we can understand the context on which we're operating? The government that is now dealing with the Constitution, item 25, of land appropriation, the Afrikaner group led by AfriForum who are the lunatic racist fringe, particularly Willem Petzer, who is their so-called historian, has now put forward this narrative, and they are promulgating this narrative. That the Afrikaners, please just listen to the numbers. Afrikaners arrived in 1652. Zulus arrived in South Africa in 1709. Tsonga arrived in 1800. Xhosa arrived in 1811. Siswati arrived in 1839, and Tswana arrived in 1852. This is ludicrous, unhistorical, has no bearing in reality whatsoever. But the nasty thing about what that they are promulgating is that the Nguni groups came into South Africa forcefully appropriated land from Khoi and San people, murdered, engaged in massive genocide, and nothing could be further from the truth. And I can sit here for the next 2 hours and prove point by point with historical reference that is all rubbish, that in fact the people who engaged in genocide and land theft were the Afrikaners from 1653. They engaged in massive genocide wherever they went. From the Western Cape, they completely annihilated and totally removed the San. And there's a book by Muhammad Adhikari called The Anatomy of a Genocide, where he proves that hundreds of thousands of San were completely decimated in the Western Cape by the Afrikaners. A book called An Inquiry by Donald H. Moody did a study in the in the Cape Peninsula, proved that anywhere between 180,000 to 200,000 Khoi and San people were systematically murdered in the Cape Peninsula alone. So this goes apart from all of the wars of attrition, the 7 wars, the 7 Xhosa wars. Just listen to the number here. The 7 Xhosa wars started in 1779. The narrative of the Afrikaners that AfriForum are pushing is that Xhosas arrived in 1811. It doesn't make sense. They fought the 100-year war from 1779. 5 of those wars were fought with Khoisan groups, with Khoi groups, particularly led by Stearman. Stearman, who in 1779, listen to this now, complained to a general, an English general, complaining that land has been stolen and they want revenge. They want the land returned and want revenge, blood revenge, for the years of oppression and murder of Khoi people. So coming back to it, there were 5 groups. There were 5 groups essentially which peopled South Africa, and this goes back many thousands of years. So I just want to deal with 2 things very quickly, if you don't mind, if you've got the time for me.
We don't have enough time,
are you with me?
If you can make it brief, Brian.
Very, very quickly. The Botswana group in the north, the very north of South Africa, the Botswana group, and there was a study done in 2012, a massive in-depth thesis of the mitochondrial DNA of Botswana people. Listen to this. Botswana people on average are 68% Khoisan. They have Khoi genetics. In other words, they had to be in South Africa for thousands of years for there to be gene flow, for there to have been admixture between the 2 groups. So now the question is, we have to ask ourselves, do the Botswana, do the Bapedi, who's the younger group now, do they have a rightful claim to the land? Of course they have a rightful claim. Let's come to Xhosa people. Xhosa people can trace their lineage back all the way to 1060. And this was through particularly the Abatembu. Can claim it all the way back to Sweden, who was based in what is known as KwaZulu-Natal today in 1060. We know that there were groups like which the Afrikaners hid this history. Now, let me just quickly, while I say the Afrikaners hid this history, I am on Facebook teaching these things. I get banned for 30 days for no reason every single day. I'm now still 15 days from being banned. I'm banned on Twitter because when I challenge these racist right-wing Afrikaner groups, I get banned. I get banned from challenging them. Yeah, I'm almost done.
Let me bring it back to the Khoi and the San people currently living here in South Africa. What sort of role do they have in South Africa going forward?
I think that's a very, very clever question you've asked. And let me explain to you why it's a clever question. Ex-President Zuma last year cut the number of kings, the number of official royal houses from 1 million to 6. to prove that there were 6 direct groups who historically belong and has got historical claim going back almost 2,000 years. These are Nguni and Botswana Sotho groups. The Khoi groups has to go through the same, has to experience the same sort of study. We need to study in terms of in terms of blood quantum. What is the percentage of mitochondrial DNA that makes us Khoi? Do you understand what I'm saying? Number 2, who were, if there was actual royalty? Until these facts are established, and these guys, you're just showing the pictures now, who are funded, these Khoi consciousness are funded by AfriForum. The funding behind all of them is by AfriForum, and these right-wing racists who now all of a sudden have found Khoi consciousness. They don't understand history. They have got no idea of history. All they can tell you in terms of history is that, oh, we've got drawings and cave drawings. They can't tell you the difference between petroglyphs, woody petroglyphs, which is 100,000 years old, and paintings, which is 30,000 and 7,000 years old.
Brian,
they can't tell you the difference.
Brian, in terms of to cut you off, in terms of the Khoisan identity in the wider sense, has it undergone a sort of a revival of late?
Well, do we call it a revival? We don't. The truth of the matter is we don't know. We don't know I do not know what my culture is. We now discover our language in Namibia. So we know we spoke Khoi, or a type of Khoi Khoa. We don't know our language. Our language was beaten out of us. Why so-called colored people in the Western Cape remove their front 4 teeth is because Afrikaners, when we spoke our language, would take a hammer and a chisel and knock the 4 teeth out. That is why people even just remove the teeth themselves. Don't know why. So we need to, before we go into any land claims, we need to have a consultative organization that will study the true history of all of us in the West, or all of us in South Africa, which includes all of the main Nguni, Botswana, Sotho groups, and our relationship between the two. Case in point, on average, 50% of all Xhosa people have got Khoisan DNA. So the question I ask you again, when you've got people in the north who are 68% Khoisan, people in the Eastern Cape who are more than 50% Khoisan, how do you then separate a group referring to themselves as Khoisan completely extraneous to these people? It is ludicrous. The argument is ludicrous. And the argument is only being fomented and promulgated by this racist lunatic fringe AfriForum and their so-called historian Willem Petzer, who knows nothing about history, obviously.
Brian, let's leave it there. I think we've run out of time. Brian, Ebden, some interesting points that you're promulgating, and no doubt that we will bring in more views on this issue. Tomorrow, hopefully, we'll bring in more views with regards to the Khoi and San and this conference that's happening. And, we get a plethora of views, a raft of views on this issue, because it's a very, very important issue. Brian Ebden is a Khoisan researcher. We thank you very much indeed for your time.